And so he ends up leaving a note. Rose got the note, and the note was basically saying, I do want to be with you, or I want to be with you, or something to that effect. Okay, so this episode opens with Emma, Karen on the road, and it's just her. So Rose is not with her. So obviously, at this point, it's looking like she pulled off and left her. Now, who knows? We may find out later on the date she decided not to go and she went. But at this point, it's looking like she left her. As she was driving to Minnesota, she had this flashback of when Esther came to visit her in prison, and you can clearly see that they had a very close relationship.
Nice, sweet girl.
Esther had a lot of love for Karen, and she even made a joke. She was telling her that the first thing she's going to do when she get out is she's going to do her hair, because she's she's a stylist. So Esther was like, well, I'll wait until then. Now, it doesn't say, I don't think it said how far into her sentence, her 7-year sentence she was, but Esther was like, I'll wait until then because you're the only person that know how to do my hair anyway. And she asked her, it was odd, she asked her, are we safe? Did you keep us safe? This is what she asked. Asked Esther. And of course, Esther shook her head, yes.
Are we safe? Did you keep us safe?
So obviously, what the hell's going on? And so, of course, then it, flashed back to her driving, and you see her cross over into Minnesota. So, in the next scene, you see Mary. She's sitting in a bar, and she's clearly thinking about what she's done. And she get a text from John. So she go to meet John. John is in a shop. He's being fitted for a suit for Esther's funeral. And Karen and Mary arrived. And, she's trying to figure out, like, what's going on. Because apparently they had a meeting and he didn't show up. And she's, like, reminding him that you work for me and you don't just not show up for meetings. And, he felt that she was kind of short with the woman that was helping him, the customer service rep. And so he was telling her that she should apologize. And, how his mom used to work customer service. She used to work the makeup counter. And she used to have all these horror stories about customers. And how she reminds him a lot of his mom, and how she conducts herself, and how she's very stern and no nonsense. But he's like, well, my mom was always kind. And basically he felt that she should apologize to the rep that was helping him. And then he said mentioned his mom's eyes and how they had the same eyes, and how he used to like getting lost in her eyes, which is Creep John. Okay.
And she used to look at me in just that way. I love getting caught in her stare.
So then he asked her, so when I find her, what are you going to do? And so of course she's like, well, it doesn't matter. Basically I'm paying you to find her. He was like, well, you already spoke to her. You went to visit her so many years ago in prison. So of course she's asking him, well, how do you know about that? And like he done told you several times, it's his job to know things. And she basically said that, that was a long time ago. She's a different person. She has different questions. So he was like, oh, so you do believe people can change?
I was a different person then. I have different questions now.
So you do believe in change?
Because if you remember when she went to his hotel and all that, nonsense, blackmailing him into partaking in this little adventure of hers, the question came up. If he asked her, do you think that people can change? And then she said, I think at the time she said no, but he's now saying, oh, so now you think that people can change. So we flash to Pete. Pete is arriving at Esther's funeral, and surprise, surprise, he walked up to sign the book. And he walks up right behind John. So John just signed the book, and Pete walked up, and it was weird because John looked at Pete like he recognized him.
All yours.
But Pete didn't. It wasn't. He didn't have the same familiar look, right? So, excuse me. So Pete is looking through the book to see who signed. He's trying to see if Karen or Emma is there. And after he saw that, that he didn't see her name in the book, he just went and sat down, and they're both down sitting waiting for Karen to arrive. So Karen didn't go to the funeral, but she did make her way to a storage unit that Esther had. And in this dresser drawer, there was this box that she kept recipes in, and she found a photo of a couple, and it was an interracial couple. It was a black woman and a white man, and there was this address. And so she went to the address, and you saw this little girl just playing in the yard. It's raining, and so she's doing what kids do, splashing in the mud and just having herself a good old time. And so Emma walked over, and she saw her, and the little girl came over to the fence, and you get the feeling, we're assuming that this is Karen's daughter. But eventually her mom came out, wanted to know what was going on, and Emma had to leave. So we flash to Rose. Rose is in her room. Luckily we find out she's not locked in, but she's looking at the text that she received from the text of the conversation she had with Emma about the car. And she is, depressed. So I don't know, judging by this scene, it's looking like maybe Emma did leave her. But there's a knock at the door, and it's her father. And she clearly has a different relationship with her father than she has with her mother. And he knows something is up with her, and he's asking her why she's staying cooped up in the room. And he understands that sometimes you need time alone, he needs time alone. And so of course she asked him, so why do you want to be by yourself? And he was like, well, I guess it's just one of those days. And so he asked her, what was wrong? And of course she didn't want to say anything, so she said nothing. And then he was like, well, do I have to read your mind? And he started making this weird noise, right? And she was like, don't, please stop.
Don't make me read your mind.
Don't.
And then eventually he was like, well, I'll stop on one condition, that you have lunch with me. So that was cute. You could clearly see that they have, she's definitely closer to her dad than she is to her mom. So Mary's at her hotel, and she get a call from John. And John is telling her that Karen never came to the wake. And so of course she's asking her, so did you stay to the end? And he, kind of like, oh, are you telling me how to do my job? He was like, I have a plan. So she was like, I don't want a plan, I want assurances. And then he says to her again, so, he's telling her, I have to know what you're going to do. I don't, like being in the dark. I don't know, I don't like not knowing, what to expect, basically.
I'm afraid I do need to know what your intentions are. I am not a fan of rendition.
And she starts talking about her son and how she, her son used to do the same thing to her, talking to him like now all of a sudden he's talking to him like he's some child, talking to John. How her son used to do that, and how he turned from this sweet angel to this boy who used to sit in his room all day and paint his walls dark and accuse her of being this capitalist that used people and all this kind of stuff. And she was like, well, his tone changed very quickly when I took away his allowance. And so John was like, well, he basically said, I kind of feel sorry for Jake. I mean, that is his name, Jake, right? And so you saw her facial expression change, right? And so she's like, well, one call to your parole officer, and basically you're back in prison. So she was like, so what are you going to tell them? That you gave me a phone and expense account and blackmailed me to cross state lines? And she kind of shut up.
And what would you tell them, Mary? That you gave me a phone and an expense account and blackmailed me to cross state lines?
And he said, I'll call you when basically I have something to tell you. So, yeah, girl, hey, I don't feel sorry for your ass. You're getting exactly what you deserve. So in the next scene, you see this person, you know, the planes are taking off, and you see this guy jump in the car, and you realize it's Adam. So she done flew her little piece in because she needed comfort, and who else is she going to call? I mean, as far as, you know, everybody else knows that she's at a spa.
Hi.
And so even he thinks that she's at a spa. That he's under the impression that she snuck away to hang, you know, to be with him for a while, for a couple of days or a day or whatever the situation is. And she's telling him that he can't tell anybody that he came to Minnesota and that he saw her there. He can't tell anybody she was there. But she's saying it in like a joking kind of flirt, but she, you know, obviously we know she's serious. She don't want people to know that she was there. So they go back to her. She didn't actually take him to the hotel. She went somewhere else, and you know, they're talking, and he was, you know, basically saying that that she could talk to him about the things that's going on in her life, and you know, she could talk to him about Teresa, and you know, she basically tried to shut the conversation down. Of course, he got upset, like she's treating him like he's some kid, and then he said something weird, like how, you know, he missed Teresa, and what did he say? He said something to the fact of how he, you know, misses her and thinks about her, you know, he thinks about her all the time too, or something to that effect.
I miss her too, okay?
So I'm like, what was his relationship with Teresa? Because I'm like I said, he's young. He's about the same age as Teresa and her son Jake. So are we gonna find out that Teresa and Adam had a relationship? So Emma, you know, it is later, and so Karen did make it to the gravesite. So of course she's dealing with her grief, and then who show up? Pete. So she scares the crap out of her because he came up behind her, and she's trying to figure out, like, why are you here? How did you know I was here? Da, 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 da.
How did you find me?
So she gets away from him, get into the truck. He's now in front of the truck. She's about to run his ass over. She want to know what is going on.
Why?
I will tell you everything that you want to know.
Why was his record sealed? And he ends up telling her that his records were, you know, how he used to work there 15 years ago, and he developed a close relationship with one of his patients. She was 16, he was 25. Nothing, you know, ever happened, but because of the optics, he's saying that that's why he was fired. And the situation got worse when she ran away from the home, and he allowed her to stay in the cabin. So that's why they took his license. But he's basically saying that, so she started questioning, like, who is this girl? Where is she? What happened to her? And he's telling her that she's fine, and that she's, sorry, I felt like something was on my foot. He's telling her that she's fine, and she's okay. And of course, Emma was like, I don't believe you. And then he admitted that she's his wife. So he's saying that Lisa is the girl who he, you know, was in, you know, at the center of all this, you know, all the hubbub.
I don't believe you. I don't believe you.
Emma, she's my wife.
And so she clearly believed what he was saying. He got in the truck, and that was that. So in the next scene, Rose and her dad Bodie, they're out at a little spot having lunch. And he was like, see, I knew you were hungry, because she was cleaning up. And so next thing you know, the people that worked there came out and they sung happy birthday to her. And, you know, it put a smile on her face for sure. So she was happy about that. And then, you know, after they left, she was like, you know, one day they're going to realize it's not my birthday. And he was like, well, it doesn't matter. He was like, I don't need it to be a special day to celebrate my daughter. And he told her that basically that he thinks that, you know, she deserves to have everything that she want out of life. And that if there's someone or something that you want, then you should go for it and you should fight for it.
Whatever you want in this life, or whoever you want, you go get it.
Okay, so for some odd reason, Mary and John meet up in some abandoned factory yard or something. I don't know. Every other time they met up, it was in public. Why they chose this obscure place, I know not. But obviously she wanted an update, and he basically said that he was working on it. And so she basically accused him of stalling, and that she questioned his ability to get the job done.
You just keep stalling. I'm starting to think you're just playing games with me.
And of course that offended him. And then he said something to her, or something, or don't speak to me like that, or, I don't want you to feel like that, Mary. But he called her by her first name. And she said that I would prefer you call me Mrs. Barlow. And he was like, yeah, that was before I knew who you really were. It's going to be Mary from now on.
I prefer Mrs. Barlow.
Well, yeah, I really know you now, so it's gonna be Mary.
So she basically told him that she gave him this, you have this set amount of time to produce Karen Miller, and our business is concluded. And she tried to open his door to, want him to get out of the car, and he yoked her up and basically said that, now why would we be done when we're having so much fun?
I want to see Karen Miller by the end of the day, and then I think you and I are done.
We're not gonna be done.
And he said something else to her. And eventually, she spit her gum in his face, which he kept. So now he has her DNA. And he ends up getting out of the car. So she locked the door. Now she's kind of looking around. She's looking like she's about to pass out. She's so damn terrified. I'm like, what did you think was going to happen? You got in bed with a monster. And so the next time you see her, she's in a shop trying to buy a gun. So I'm like, surely she's not going to be able to walk out with a gun, because there's this whole process of getting a gun. But she's there nonetheless, and the guy's explaining, telling her all the different types of guns that they have.
What will you use it for?
So Pete and Emma, they're at the lake. I forgot the name of the lake. John did mention it when he went to see Esther, and she was telling him about how she has these rocks that she throws into the lake, and the rocks represent her sins, and the whole thing. And so she's now at the lake, and she's talking to Pete, and she's telling Pete, she finally told Pete that she didn't just come back for Esther, she came back for her daughter. And so obviously this is the first time him hearing about her having a kid.
I came to get my little girl.
And, she talked about, there was this flashback of how she ended up at Esther's house, and it was a snowstorm, and she was trying to walk to the house. She collapsed. Esther came out, took her in the house, and helped her through labor and birth. And Esther found a family, and that's who the little girl is with now. And Esther was the only other person that knew about her daughter. And, this was supposed to be temporary. She was supposed to come back at some point to get her daughter. But obviously that didn't happen. Obviously the whole thing with Parker, and then the whole thing of being in prison for 7 years. So there's that. So she wants her daughter. And so, of course, Pete is like, well, this is not the right time to do this. I want you to trust me. I'm going to help you to get your daughter, but we have to do this the right way. There's a right way and a wrong way. And basically you are not in a position right now to take care of her anyway.
I'll help you get Freya back, but not today, not yet.
So it's not in their best interest for us to get her, for you to get her now. So while they're talking, someone is staring from afar, and you realize it's John. So John has found Karen, aka Emma.
I found you.
How he was able to find her was, of course, going back to the story of that Esther was telling her about the rocks and throwing the rocks into the lake. And of course, he already knew the lake. So he eventually went back to Esther's grave. And of course, this was after Emma had been, and she had left a rock on her grave. And so that's how he knew that she had been there. And that's what he went to the lake, and he now see Karen talking to Pete. So, Rose is at Emma's house. So she went to Emma's house, I guess hoping that she had returned. You can see you can see the text. Obviously, Emma left her because he was saying that she was asking, "Why did you leave me? We were supposed to leave together." So she was able to get into Emma's house because the screen had been cut and the window was cracked. So it was like, okay, well, somebody already been there, or what's that all about? But most likely, I wouldn't be surprised if it was Pete, because she did kind of just abruptly leave town, and he no longer has a key. So, but so she ended up going into the house, and so she's kind of like hanging out, and she's like wearing her shirt, and you can clearly see that she's in love with Emma. So while she's laid on the bed, Tom comes by. He's knocking on the door because he's still trying to get in contact with her. He hasn't spoken to her since that whole situation. And, he's been trying to call her. And so he ends up leaving a note. Rose got the note, and the note was basically saying, I do want to be with you, or I want to be with you, or something to that effect. So this devastates Rose, and she is pissed. So while John is clearly, he's still at the lake, he could see Karen, he called Mary, and she said she wanted an update, and he lied and said that he didn't see her.
You have Karen Miller?
She did not show.
And he also told her that he know what she did. And of course, she stopped for a minute, and she was like, because at this point, she was just found some random wood she's walking through. And she's like, well, what did I do? And so he was like, oh, so are we going to play games? And then he hung up the phone.
What do you know?
What, are you going to play games?
And so she's realizing that he knows. And so we flash to Rose. She's tearing Emma's house up. She's so hurt. And then she ends up going through her drawer. She's pulling stuff out of the drawers. For whatever reason, she kept these damn newspapers with her face on the front, with her name and all this kind of stuff. So now Rose saw these papers. She saw these papers. So now she's like, who is this person? Now she's trying to figure out who this person really is. Then you realize why Mary was traipsing through the woods is because somehow she was able to walk into a store and walk out with a gun. So, okay, so now she's out in the woods practicing. And, I mean, that's pretty much how the episode ends. So, yeah, I'm just kind of confused, like how she walked in and walked out with a gun. But anyway, I'm going to leave that there, and I will talk to you guys in the next episode.